Hi, I'm back in Alexander Maclaren's book, Leaves from the Tree of Life. His second sermon in this book is The Altar of Incense, and his meditations are based on Exodus 30, verses 7 and 8. He always starts the sermon with a quote of the scripture. So I'm just going to read it from the book. Aaron shall burn thereon sweet incense every morning, and at even he shall burn incense upon it, a perpetual incense before the Lord. So Maclaren makes a connection to the Old Testament offerings and our offerings as Christians of prayer and worship. Those of us who are former Jehovah's Witnesses frequently have a transition period upon leaving the Watchtower where we question things and we may find discomfort in prayer, not knowing who we should pray to, how we should pray, and also a continued rejection or distrust of worship services at churches. It was the reading of books by people like Alexander Maclaren, godly men, and their obvious attention to worship and prayer and a godly walk of life or way of life that helped me get past some of my prejudices and fears. So I wanted to share with you some of Maclaren's meditations. I'll just read portions from this sermon. So again, he's dealing with a passage in Exodus. He goes, whensoever the plan of the tabernacle or temple and their furniture was drawn, it had a symbolical religious significance, the perception of which is, in some aspects, more important than the question as to the period of origin, which now overshadows it. So he's not addressing the when, he's addressing the significance of the furniture, the events in the Old Testament offerings. He goes, what does the altar of incense say to us modern Christians? Incense is a symbol of prayer, as the psalmist had learned when he said, let my prayer be directed before thee as incense, using the technical word for laying a sacrifice on the altar. That quote of the Psalms is Psalms 141 verse 2, or reference to. He also references Revelation 5:8. So too the apocalyptic seer saw the 24 elders with golden censers full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. What is the point of comparison between symbol and reality? How was the fragrance of the incense set free to rise in wreaths of smoke? By being kindled. Whence was the kindling? Whence was it kindled? By coals from the altar of sacrifice. When it was kindled, what followed? It went swirling up in wreaths of fragrant smoke, which were an odor of sweet smell acceptable to God. So now he talks about our prayers. He says, too many of our prayers are but dead sticks of unkindled incense. And then he says, that is a poor notion of praying which limits it to petitions. The truest prayers do not say give, but lose themselves in God, and in the contemplating Him are too conscious of blessed fruition to be conscious of want. There is a prayer that, if not like Martha, careful and troubled, is at least concerned and supplicatory about many things, and there is another which, like Mary, sits satisfied with goodness and full of the flavor of the Lord, and is communion and interchange of love. There were specific directions for ensuring the perpetuity of the incense burning. Twice a day, the ministering priest carried a censerful to be laid on the altar. Kindled in the morning from the altar of sacrifice, it glowed and glimmered all day, perhaps much of it white ashes, but with a little spark at its heart. In the evening it was renewed, and in like manner smoldered all night. If the incense of our prayer is to glow all day, it has to be renewed and rekindled daily. The modern talk about being independent of times and seasons, being ready to worship always, and so not needing definite periods of worship, is worse than rubbish. No man will have reverence diffused through his life unless he has a concentrated reservoir of worship in the background of his life. We cannot become strong in the Lord without the daily food of specific acts of articulate worship, any more than we can keep up bodily strength without a morning and evening meal. We plead for no mechanical observance of times of prayer, but still there must be the frequent recurrence of special seasons of devotion, if devotion is to run like a golden thread through our lives. So I just liked Maclaren's meditations. They were of help to me. We ex-witnesses, I would have to say, cannot really afford to neglect the means by which God provided for our moving forward, and our discipleship and Christian growth. There are means where we can be helped. One of them is worship, public worship, and reading of good materials and reading of scripture and prayer. I'm going to link to two videos actually. The first one is one that we did discussing from Ray France's second book about freedom of Christian worship. In that book, this one is, should ExJWs be content with friends, fellowship, and no public worship? So we read Ray's thoughts and then also comment ourselves. The second link is based on some readings we were doing from J.C. Ryle as we went through the book of Matthew, his commentary on Matthew. This one was called, Why Were Jewish Christians Persecuted? Unlike JWs, they continued to worship with non-Christians. Some good things to think about.